Call this special meeting to order. The recording and or broadcast of this meeting is being made at the direction of the board, which may capture images and sounds of those attending the meeting. Begin by calling the roll. Steve. Here. Vladimir. Here. Shelley.
Here.
Jessica.
Here.
I'm also here. All board members are in attendance. Would everyone please stand for the pledge of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, moving on to D3. Would any board members like to provide comment on the agenda? If not, would anyone like to move to approve the agenda?
Second.
Motion to approve the agenda as presented, made by Vladimir, seconded by Shelley. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0. D4, closed session reports. No action was taken in closed session. Apologies to everyone for being a little bit late coming out of closed session. Moving straight on to section E, the consent calendar. Would any board members like to provide comment on the consent calendar? Hearing none, would anyone like to make a motion?
Second.
Motion to approve the consent calendar is presented, made by Vladimir, seconded by Shelley. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes 5-0. Moving straight on to F1, Rose 10th School site project.
This is a historic occasion. The district has been working very hard the last several years on the development of the 10th site. And Amy Cox is here tonight. She's our CEQA consultant. The board approved a contract with Amy almost 2 years ago today to work on it. It's a very lengthy process to follow the legal obligations that are required to do in the CEQA process. Amy will give a brief overview on some slides to talk about the whole process and where we're at today. And then there'll be an action by the board. And then Clarissa Kennedy is from DWK, their legal counsel, and also been advising on the CEQA process. So I'll kind of hand it off to Amy. So Amy, thanks for being here tonight.
Thanks, Eric. Should I stand here? This is my first time meeting with you, so this is all a little new. I just stood at the wrong door for about 15 minutes.
I did give her good dinner recommendations in town.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes,
Before you start, I should say,
yes.
if anyone would like to provide public comment on this item, please submit a speaker card at the end of the row down here. Thank you. Sorry.
No problem, no problem. Great to meet you. It's been a wonderful project for many years. It's been a little over 4 years I've been working on this project, and this is my first kind of stepping into the boardroom. So it's been a long but challenging process, and I think that we're really at a point where you should be ready to vote on the school, because I think we've done a pretty thorough job in the EIR, and I've had an amazing team. So I thought what I do, Eric, are you the one clicking the slides? I'm just clicking the slides. Yep. Okay, so I thought I'd start by just giving you a quick overview of the whole presentation. I'm going to start with summarizing the California Environmental Quality Act, which we call CEQA, and talk about the topics that had impacts and mitigation measures related to Site 10. Then we had a couple of alternatives that we were required to evaluate. We had some opportunities for public input, and then I'll briefly go over some of the issues that were covered in the final EIR, which were primarily from the city of Mountain View. And then we'll talk about the next and final steps. So in terms of the overall CEQA process, we had a consultant team that was under my guidance, and we had a lot of specialists, traffic engineers, hydrologists, geologists, cultural experts. So this was really quite a team effort for everybody. We circulated what's called the draft EIR for public review, and that was March to May of this year. And then we prepared the final EIR, which includes the responses to comments that come in on the draft EIR that the public and agencies can make. And tonight we're here for final EIR certification, which includes the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, which assures that the mitigation measures will be adopted and implemented. And then we have the approval of the project. So the topics that you see in yellow here are the ones that required mitigation measures. These are all the topics that we looked at in the EIR. I won't read this list. You can see it for yourselves. And I just wanted to emphasize that all impacts were able to be mitigated to less than significant, which is great, because sometimes when you have significant and unavoidable impacts, you have to make special findings, and it gets much more complicated and onerous. So if you have any specific questions about the specific topics, please let me know. I'll try to remember all those details of the whole report. So we also looked at alternatives. So CEQA requires that an EIR evaluate potential feasible alternatives capable of avoiding or substantially lessening the significant effects of the project. In this case, and every CEQA document has to have what's called the no project evaluated, and that means absolutely no change from existing conditions. So it would have, in this case, been the retention of the same shopping center and no new school at the site. And then we looked at another alternative, which was a reduced scale for 600 students rather than 900 students and a few less buildings on the site. So we identified alternative 2 as the environmentally superior alternative, in addition, of course, to the no project alternative. So in terms of opportunities for public input, we have what's called the notice of preparation of the EIR. That was basically in June of 2022. And that's basically telling the agencies and the public, we're going to be doing this EIR. Here's the project. If you have any comments, let us know now, because then we can incorporate them into the document. And then we notified the public and agencies that we had the draft EIR out on the street, and that was in March of this year. And the review period went into early May. So the primary comment letter that came back, there were just a couple of comments from the public that really didn't address the EIR itself. But the city had a fairly extensive letter that went through all of these various topics. I'd say the biggest issue that was kind of repeated over and over again is that the city wanted the district to follow the conditions of approval that the city requires for all developers. But we had to reiterate to them that the district is an independent lead agency, and you adopted a resolution that basically exempts you from city requirements. However, that doesn't exempt you from anything you do on the city's right of way or on city land. So we did clarify that that was relevant for the conditions of approval, but otherwise we have mitigation measures that address all these significant impacts. So these were some of the issues that came up. You know, we have great bicycle and pedestrian access provided by the site plan. The zoning for the site was just had to be clarified a little bit. And the vehicle miles traveled for schools. It's a complicated project, you could imagine, because of trips generated by the students. But REIR looked at the net trip generation compared to the existing trip generation from the shopping center to look at the fact that the net contribution was really pretty insignificant. And then we also focus a lot on the actual criteria of CEQA, which are very, very specific as to what's identified as significant. And then so the next steps for this evening are that the board would certify, we hope the board would certify the EIR as meeting the requirements of CEQA, adopt the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, and finally approve the project. And then all of the above are addressed in the resolution. And if these 3 steps happen, we then in the next 5 days, we file what's called a notice of determination with the county clerk and with the state, so that sets off a period of when there can be potential challenges to the certification. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Any initial questions?
The stormwater, the storm sewer
Yeah.
issue was I thought gonna be a big one. It sounds like you were able to mitigate that and come up with a resolution for that issue.
Yeah, there were 2 sort of issues for the stormwater. One was the fact that we have this 2.2 acre city park on the property. So temporarily, while there's no park there, while the school goes ahead and develops, we have to have an on-site stormwater system on that property, just a temporary one.
Okay.
And the other was that on the other side of the site, there's drainage from the off-site locations, and that has to kind of be rebuilt once the school is constructed.
Great, thank
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I believe you said that one of the things that we have to do tonight is approve the project. My understanding of looking at the resolution is that we approved the EIR.
You're doing all three things. You're certifying the EIR as meeting the requirements of CEQA. Then you're adopting what's called the mitigation monitoring and reporting program. And the third is approving the project. Which is approving it as it's shown currently in the site plan.
Meaning, if I can interpret
Yeah.
the 900 student alternative as opposed to the no project alternative or the reduced project alternative. We're just sort of
Right.
saying that we think it's okay to go ahead with the full project.
I have another question.
Yeah.
It has to do with the tree removal.
Uh-huh.
I read the Mountain View comments. I didn't go back to see what you had said. You were gonna put into the final EIR to mitigate the tree removal. What the city, if I remember correctly, was objecting to 150 trees being removed and 100 of them were heritage trees.
Yeah, I don't know the
Something-
exact number about the heritage trees, but we did try to clarify for them that the district will be replanting trees, but we can't replant at the ratio that they were hoping for because there's absolutely no room on the site to put that many trees. Many of the trees that we identified as being removed were diseased or in bad condition. And any trees that obviously would be on city property would have to get the approval from the city, and the mitigation for those trees would be slightly different for the ones on the site of the school district. That said, in addition to the tree removal issue, the trees also have a biological impact in the sense that there could be nesting birds in those trees. So there could be some delay, there have to be some surveys, yeah. So there's no conflicts with the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. That is really important.
And have basically all the city objections been either met or mitigated or deemed inappropriate or?
Well, from our perspective, from the whole team's perspective, we responded to all their comments. And we gave the city the responses to their comments, and we haven't heard back from them. So we feel at this point that we have addressed their concerns. Eric, have you heard anything more from the city?
Okay, all right.
Great.
Are there any requests for public comment?
No.
Any, further discussion, comments from board members? I've seemed like a very thorough report, and I'm happy
Thanks.
to hear that. I mean, it seems intuitively obvious that a school site with 2 acres of park and fields will be better for the environment and everybody around it than the shopping center.
Yeah,
But
it's a
I
great
appreciate the
reuse.
thoroughness and that we were able to get everything below the significant impact. Thank you.
And Eric, I'm gonna give you this. I have an extra copy actually. of this document.
Oh, thank you.
All of it that I'm retired.
You gotta sign it.
Right.
Can you sign?
We're speaking to autographs here.
Make sure you read it.
Read it again.
Read it, annotate it.
All right.
Thank you.
In the absence of further discussion, I will entertain a motion to adopt resolution 23/24-26.
So moved.
Second.
Absent any further discussion. Motion to approve resolution 23/24-26 made by Vladimir, seconded by Shally. I will call the roll. Resolution. Steve.
Yes.
Vladimir,
Yeah.
Shally,
Yes.
Jessica.
Yes.
I also vote yes. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. The end of a long road. And the start of another long road.
Okay.
We will then move on to F2, facilities master plan update.
Sure. You can scan here from Architects, and they're gonna give the board some identified needs. And update the board on the 9 sites and get some input from the board and some direction on some prioritization of some future projects for our facility master plan. So thank you, Monique, for being here.
Thank you. Nice to see you all again. Good evening. So I am Monique Wood at CAW Architects. I'm here to give you an update on the facilities master plan for the district. And so our agenda today, we will do a high level view of history and the high level needs of the district. We will talk through our understanding of the district's educational objectives for the master plan and how that translates through to the guiding principles that we use to be able to identify the needs on each campus. We will talk through how we started to kind of take this massive number of input items and group them together. And then we'll go over the budget and the draft project lists and hopefully get some input. So starting at the beginning, in our assessment of the campuses, we started off with an existing facilities conditions assessment of every single campus. We understand that there have been no bond projects since 2004. And we're working with, 20-plus-year infrastructure and buildings on these campuses. In addition to that, there are a substantial number of portables that are existing on the campuses. Most of them are 10+ years as well. So you've been providing extraordinary educational programs, but sometimes within substandard, not the proper sized facilities for the wonderful work that you're doing in these campuses. In talking with the district subcommittee, we identified the educational objectives from a district standpoint, which are to support the kinder and TK program, which we understand is going to be expanding and mandate from the state, to make more very substantial moves toward getting to a middle school model, which I know has been under consideration for a long time, to support your very innovative educational goals, to improve the existing campuses and the existing classrooms, HVAC upgrades, finishes, improving the lights, the things that are really going to make these wonderful buildings that you have last for a very long time. Supporting student health and wellness, coming out of the pandemic and trying to make sure that we have the spaces that are necessary for counseling student wellness centers. Enhancing the outdoor spaces. One of the things that we consistently heard from parents and staff at pretty much every campus was shady structures and outdoor use. We have these wonderful campuses and these wonderful spaces outside, but we would love to be able to use them better. And then from a district standpoint, the operational costs of having struggling HVAC systems and having to lease portables on lots of the campuses is something that is an operational cost that we hope to try and make better for you as part of the master. So how that translated into guiding principles that we use, obviously the supporting of kinder and TK means that we have to improve and or expand those spaces, not just in terms of the classrooms themselves, but the supporting restrooms. There are required play spaces for the outdoor that need to be accommodated as well. In the infrastructure bucket, that's the real nitty gritty, non-glamorous stuff that keeps our buildings working, our HVAC, making sure that our roofs are watertight, but also giving technology and infrastructure upgrades. And then site work repairs wherever we saw them on the campus, tops and things that needed to be restructured. In terms of balancing a campus model, this was really looking more holistically at the whole district. How are we going to move to a middle school model for the whole district? How are we going to accommodate better the STEAM programs and the music and art programs that you're providing? And then making sure that the shared spaces that are used by not only the students and the parents, but the community at large, right? If you have a large multi-purpose room, that will be useful for everyone in the community as well. And just a general overarching developing spaces that will inspire, that will allow the students and the faculty and the staff to really have wonderful places to be able to provide their services and for the students to learn. So on the right, these 4 columns are those 4 kind of guiding principles. And as we started to look at the projects that started to evolve from each different campus, we realized there were kind of 3 different groups. One, group A, is the campus modernization. So that's that utilities and infrastructure and making sure that the existing assets are as viable as they can for the longest time that they can be useful for you and making them more beautiful as well. But then in terms of group B, it's really program improvements. How can we either reuse existing spaces, slightly reconfigure them, or have to build brand new spaces if there really are just inadequate spaces on a particular campus. And the list of that program improvements for group B is pretty robust. The kinder and TK, library, STEAM and innovation spaces, music and art, on some campuses, new classrooms, administrative improvements, and then multipurpose spaces and the student wellness center. The student wellness center in particular, again, is a program that the district is wanting to make sure you're accommodating for the future and for programs that evolve, which is the. And then the counseling center and locker room improvements are really more focused at the junior campuses right now, and that's in anticipation of moving to that. And then group C is all of the exterior outside of the building improvements. So the play yards for the kinder, lunch canopies, blacktop, outdoor shade, and other improvements. So we did a kind of robust chart, and this was more just to graphically make sure that we could be very clear and simple in the way that we presented this. But we went through each campus and identified within those different groups, group 1, 2, and 3, what level of work needed to be done at each of the campuses. And these were developed with input from the principals, from the surveys to the staff and the parents and the faculty. And it was also through the workshops that we had with the teachers and principal on the campuses. So all of that broad input and through our existing conditions assessments, we identified what we felt are the most important needs for each of the campuses. So you can see the different colors here. The red is new construction, purple is reconfiguration, and kind of the teal is modernization. So modernization is effectively keeping the envelope of the rooms consistent, but improving things like HVAC and lights and finishes. Reconfiguration might mean taking out that wall and expanding to have 2 classrooms become one. So that's where the difference is.
Can I just say really quickly, I know there was a late change to this,
Yeah.
so Marcy, can we make sure that the version that attached to the agenda online has the updated slide here? I think it's important for families to see.
What is
Thank you.
What was the late change made?
It was aligning the colors of the dots in the chart with the site plans. It was pointed out that there were some inconsistencies. So I do want to say the facility site plans for each of the campus is what was used to identify the budget numbers. And so the scope that's identified on the site plans is really where we are
It's the
taking our
correct scope.
direction and the cost. This is more just to give kind of a graphical.
Yeah,
view
It's
of-
another good way, different brains.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Well, and so one of the other components of this is to identify the phase 1 projects that we worked through with the steering committee from the district. And this is by all means a draft, and it is our recommendation, and it's up for discussion, but these were the projects at each individual site that we felt were the highest priority and where we felt the highest need was for the district as a whole. We wanted to make sure that each site was getting improvements. And so you can see within each column, there are definitely improvements at each campus. And then there are some properties that have, maybe new construction where others just have reconfiguration or modernization, but this was all part of discussion of where do we see the highest needs and where can we see the biggest impact while getting the most bang for your budget that you're looking to potentially go out for. So with that, we wanted to just give an overview of the way that we assess the budget numbers that you're going to see. So project budgets is really the delivery of an actual project, an individual project. It's the construction, but it's also design and engineering costs and permitting. It's everything that goes into making that building get built and happen. However, there are other costs that will be assessed, program management and program consultants, escalation, which is always our favorite, and inflation, a contingency for that, temporary housing, should it be necessary. We don't actually know at this point. It will be based upon phasing, and then having program contingencies to give some allowance for fluctuation of need and priority. So that accounts for, well, the project budget accounts for 65 to 67% of the overall budget. And in looking at that chart that we had, the total of the master plan work for the project cost would be approximately 468. And then when you amplify that by the additional numbers for bond expenses, it's about 689. And then the priorities that we have identified with the steering committee total about 158 for the project budgets and 236 for the full bond budget. So we thought everyone loves a thermometer, and so we're gonna start there. We like to think of them as buckets and shopping lists, but it works as a thermometer as well. So what we've done here is really start with the three main projects that we believe are really the highest priority for across the board for the campus. It's campus modernization projects, which, if I go back to my list just to make sure. It's the HVAC, fire alarm, classroom AV, lighting, roofing. It's the kind of infrastructure to make sure all the existing assets are going to be viable for many, many years to come. We know that we are really needing to prioritize the kinder and TK, and then lunch canopies, simply because it was something that was so consistent as a request from parents, from staff, from principals. We identified that that would be a well-poised first priority, highest priority. So you can see those three as they start to kind of fill up this bucket. The numbers on the left here are the project costs, so that's 65 to 67%. And that's also what's reflected here. And then we've also identified how the bond program costs will be escalated on the right-hand side. So beyond these top three, which are shown on the thermometer, we've identified a bucket for each of the other priority projects that we have kind of developed with the steering committee. That doesn't mean to say that we can't have other pieces of scope on that shopping list, but these are the ones that we wanted to really focus on. So if I can go through these pretty quickly, the innovation labs, and we prioritize the ones at Oak and Santa Rita only. And I wanted to be very clear that this cost is only for the two campuses, Oak and Santa Rita. At Gardner Bullis, the new classrooms, replacing the portables, and that again is replacement only at Gardner Bullis. Multi-purpose buildings at Oak and Santa Rita only, and those are new construction at those two campuses. Libraries, new construction at Loyola, Oak, Santa Rita, and Springer only. Priority music building, a new one at Eagan. And then for the middle school model, this was one of the conversation points we had the last time we met with you, was how do we make sure that there is some motion towards that in this first priority phase? And what we really discovered was that building out the new sixth grade classrooms and building out the locker room improvements will really get you a huge step towards being able to accommodate the middle school fully at the current junior campuses. It is a nice chunky number there. And then the hardcore resurfacing, simply because we're going to have construction traffic on the campuses. If there is major work occurring, we would always recommend that that's something that's factored in, but that will need to be a little bit more finessed as the individual projects are identified. So this is definitely something we would like to have more discussion on as we finish the conversation. So what we're here for today is really to talk through our priority list, and if there are things that are missing from that priority list, or how we want to start to really hone down that list, with the intent that at the August 5th board meeting that we will have delivered to you and given you time to review a final compiled facilities master plan, and that a project priority list can be refined and approved at that meeting.
Yes, the goal.
And that is the end of my presentation. I do have the individual campuses, an existing plan and a new plan, if that would be useful for me to walk through. And see you shake your head.
Well, there may be maybe in response to questions.
Perfect.
Questions.
Perfect.
But we all thought last meeting, so I don't know. Thank you.
Yes.
Any preliminary comment, questions?
Go back to scope block. Scope block. If I understand this page correctly, the first three items correspond to the blue section
Correct.
and the remainder correspond to the white section.
The remainder are not shown in that bucket quite yet, because we wanted to get a sense from you of what we should be including, what we should be adding into the bucket to get us to a target for the total bond program.
How much of the first three need DSA approval?
All of it.
Yes.
So every project we do has to have DSA approval. The shade structure one we like because it's a quick one. And you can immediately get something moving and done on all the campuses, like a quick start project.
It's a pre-approved.
It's a pre-approved, they have a pre-approved, pre-checked, shade structures. So we've kind of like getting that one done because it's a high priority and it's pretty easy to get moving on, while all the other ones could be in design phase.
Eric, can you, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, the way the code is written, there are very minimal things that you can do without permitting process. Even with HVAC, it's, you know, if it's a replace in kind without changing anything else, that may be able to be done.
Some re-roofing can be done.
Re-roofing,
Some re-roofing can be done, some asphalt maintenance, but once you start touching asphalt parking lot, then you have to come up to ADA compliance.
yes,
So that's another factor. Some re-roofing, the word in kind, if you replace the roof with the same type of roof and it's the same weight, then it's usually allowed.
Eric, can you say something about the lunch canopies? Because I was sort of surprised at the per canopy cost.
Yeah, just because they're prefabricated in the factory somewhere, they're pre-checked, so that it is gonna be a considerable cost.
Sure, but what I meant was that
They're
would be- I'm-
different than our existing.
that's what I'm getting at. Is I feel like the existing tents that we have are, I would expect to be 5 figures, not 6. And so
What's that, say that again?
I said the existing canopies that we have at our school. I mean, when I was involved in the PTA a million years ago, when we had to replace them, they were $20,000, not $800,000. So I just want to get a mental picture of what we're talking about constructing.
I mean, I can kind of defer some of the money, but it depends on how big they are. So they have different size models, just like it's like a DSA has different pre-check plans. So the bigger the model, I'm gonna get 300 kids under it or 200 kids. It's just that we could make it a little smaller if we needed to save on cost. But they're pre-engineered. They have to be designed. They have to be mounted correctly in the concrete drilled and all that. So there's a pretty big cost from doing a DSA approved shade structure versus some of the other ones that we have that are like more like a canopy style.
So are we talking about something with a metal roof, essentially timber roof?
That's what I was asking.
They're gonna be metal, they're almost all metal, if I remember right, from all the ones. They're
what I'm
pre-checked.
seeing in our estimate or the cost budgeting is 2,000 square foot solid covered lunch canopies for
Yeah.
each campus.
So they be free from wind and rain and everything. They're actually really nice. If you go to other elementary school districts, most of them have some of these around their campuses in different locations.
Oh, really? Okay, if you could point us at something, I think that would be helpful.
Back in a million years ago, when I was also working. Yeah, Gardner Mills, we put up a very nice lunch canopy that was torn down. And Kenyon because it didn't meet DSA approval. Which I thought it didn't need to because it was under $25,000. It's less than 16 feet high. And my understanding, so the $25,000 goes up with inflation every year. And I don't remember exactly, what 16 feet or 24 feet or something. There was a height structure underneath that height limit didn't have to be a safe tool. And I don't know if the law is still in effect or the regulation is still in effect, but the cost that we paid was less than $25,000.
Yeah, I mean, they have it's a IRA 22A, I believe is the exception. And there's some exceptions at DSA that doesn't require oversight. Because of structure, usually you can't waive structural. Anything structures around kids, almost, other than like a little seawall, like a concrete seawall that's like a couple of feet high, almost all structures require DSA approval. So DSA is pretty strict around school construction.
Yeah, this obviously was a DSA
Yeah.
exception. So I don't know whether that factors into.
I think the problem was it wasn't actually that PBSA. That's why I think we think about that.
So these are not,
Are there-
these are not the sale, they're just like
They're
actual
metal
roof-
roofs.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
if you've
so-
been to, picture it's Basona Park, if you've been to Basona.
Yeah.
Park,
Long time ago.
They
Very
have
similar to like that.
big, beautiful metal picnic areas. Pretty.
Are there any requests for public comment? Just check. Okay. Other discussion? Anybody want to provide some feedback on priorities?
Feedback.
This was great based on the feedback that we gave last time. This is really, I like all the different ways you showed it. I like seeing it in different ways. It allowed me to digest it a lot better. So thank you.
I thought this was really good too. Thank you for rejigging the categories based on our conversations so that it's easier for me to understand how the different puzzle pieces are gonna fit together. Thanks.
It helps us.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Group C, creative scope grouping, group C, blacktop. Sent, Eric, an excerpt from LA Unified, where they used, a light colored blacktop. And given that we can expect, heat generally to be rising, I don't see why we're even considering. Now, that may be a term of art encompassing a whole bunch of things, and that's fine.
Paved play.
The other comment I have, and this is something that I guess the rest of the board needs to consider, was there, number 4, master plan guiding principles designed for community. Boy, what we provided here seems really weak. The multi-purpose building, which already exists, student wellness centers are not in the first round of priority 1. Student counseling center are not in priority 1s either. So I don't know that we're actually meeting our declaration that we're designing for community.
I'll just add a comment. I think that was also a way to think about the physical design of where new buildings would be placed on campus. So I think of Oak, because I was at that session. It was very much about what's the best location of some of the new or reconfigured buildings on the campus to be able to create, like you can see here in the kind of upper right building area, we would ultimately create a little quad. There would be some, I think the same thing happened at Almond, just creating some different learning spaces and gathering spaces on campus to build campus community. And Vladimir, as well as those wellness centers and things that goes beyond the campus community.
Thanks. I think we could do more. I'll leave it at that.
I had a couple of comments. I mean, I think I appreciated the sort of guiding principles and groupings, and then sort of the implicit priorities that were then incorporated in the phase 1 proposal. I mean, in my mind, modernization and maintenance makes sense as a first priority, and so it makes sense to do all that stuff as fast as we can. I think the second priority is then what I would characterize as urgent program issues, which I kind of see as 3 buckets. I think 6th grade has been an issue for a long time, and as it shrinks, and as we want to try to get that over to the middle schools to provide better educational experience for 6th graders and our 7th and 8th graders. So to me, that's sort of 2A. 2B, I mean, I think you could look at this in a lot of different ways, but to me, it's sort of equity. I would say equity disparities. So the multis, which are affecting certain schools that can't do things that other schools can do. Potentially music, that where there are good music spaces at some schools and not at other schools. I mean, I remember at Santa Rita, you had the trombonists were in the staff workroom because there was just no other space for them to practice. So I could see a focus on that. Maybe the STEM lab, maybe the library. I think that actually requires a little bit more honing in to see how urgent those needs are, because portable library can be fine, or it could be an impact. So I'm not the expert. I don't know how to do that. And then in my mind, sort of 2C with that. So TK and K, I would actually kind of put in 2C unless there's sort of a significant impact. And this is going to be campus to campus based. So I don't mean any of this to second guess. I'm just sort of, this is how I would think about it, is that like some campuses, the TK problem is pretty severe, but other campuses I think are kind of doing okay, or as okay as they would be with a new building. Then third, I would put less urgent program issues. And then fourth would be sort of the miscellaneous stuff. And so I think the only thing that I would question about this project list off the top, or just want to have a longer conversation about, is actually the lunch campaigns. I get the impulse to sort of like, this is something we can do in 6 months or whatever it is. I'm probably misestimating by a factor of 2, knowing DSA, but like, this is something that's easier to do.
Sure.
But in my mind, the number is still large enough that I don't know that it makes sense. I mean, especially because the lunch canopies in some of these plans have been thoughtfully located relative to the overall campus plan. And so it's a couple of things. It's worried that we're putting the cart before the horse in a couple of places. It's also that, given that the district has taken on responsibility for devices and continues to take on responsibility for other things, like that's something that where PTAs who really want new stuff could potentially accelerate. You know, we sometimes think about how do we make efficient use of all of the financial resources of our communities. And like, I think it would be great if we had facilities master plans where somebody who really wanted to make a large donation, we could kind of funnel that donation into like, okay, here's something that the district won't be able to do for 5 or 8 years, but if you can raise the money, we can deal with DSA and get it done faster.
The Brian Johnson restrooms.
Potentially. The price is right.
Please don't put that in the master plan.
I don't want any more detail.
So the notion of potentially having a donation to being able to funnel a donation, I think is it. I don't agree about the name that I suggested, but
Well, and it's something we've done in a more ad hoc way in the past. You know, we have buildings on our campuses that are there because we've had people come and say.
But those were ads. When you're talking about equity, those facilities are more affluent schools.
Sure. That's why I want to clear out lunch canopies, which I don't think at the end of the day has a big impact on our educational thing. To everybody can get by with what they've got right now.
Mhm.
If somebody really wants to spend their money accelerating that plan by a few years, fine. But it would free us up
Okay.
to put the bond money into the facilities
Better use.
that we really need. Yeah. So,
But then it would mean possibly our more affluent campuses are getting those lunch canopies. They put the money into.
so if that happens,
Yeah.
and I agree that it's inequitable, we can make a compensating program decision to move money away from the more affluent campuses to the less affluent campuses. We're not bound in every instance to do peanut butter across all the different campuses. If, like, for instance, Gardner Wallace has a brand new library. So we don't make it somewhere.
Anonymous.
Yes. I think they live nearby, but we could say, okay, that donation was X thousands of dollars, millions, whatever it was. We're gonna use that same amount of money and spread it around our money, spread it around campuses. So we don't, it's not necessarily inequitable, is what I'm trying to get at. If we do things correctly.
We've also been having discussions between PTA leadership and LAF and the district on a regular basis about how do we get the PTAs out of the fundraising business and have them focus on their community building and advocating for kids, which is really their charge. So I want to be mindful of that too.
Sure.
What I appreciate, Brian, just from my notes I'm hearing is kind of some, this was you, and I'd like to hear from the rest, but prioritization, really, and I heard, sixth grade middle school, then some of those bigger equity disparities of the multis and what have you. Urgent TKK needs, other programmatic needs, lunch canopies at the end. This will help us once we fully determine the total bond available dollars to kind of have that ranked priority. So any other color that the rest of you can give, like, how does that list sound to you all?
So I would agree with prioritizing anything that moves our academic programs forward. So for me, like, I look at the libraries. I remember in the last round, there was a few of our schools did not get new libraries. And I know that you put a library in a portable and it's adequate, but the libraries are also teaching spaces. They're also safe spaces for kids who maybe suffering issues with other kids. So I would like to see us prioritize, like, move the libraries up. They serve more than a function of housing books.
It can be a wellness center of sorts.
Yeah, totally.
No, I was a library.
I was a library. That was my safe space, so.
I would also note that Santa Rita, sorry,
Just wanted to make sure Shelley was being.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Sorry.
note that Santa Rita and, have absolutely abysmal multipurpose rooms. They ought to be given priority over everybody else in terms of building a new multipurpose room, because they've suffered for years.
No, I agree with your tranches for sure, Brian.
Yeah, you don't want to say anything that I would disagree with. And I think it's just a matter of going through and tweaking through the numbers a little bit more and giving that thought. Getting that feedback.
If there are other scope projects at other campuses that we have not identified the costs for, but you'd like to see those as part of the shopping list, we can certainly give you the home in on those numbers as well. So, you know, this is really one of the kind of priority projects that we've already discussed, but if there are others that are missing, then we can.
Yeah, well, I think that's the way I look to staff and principals a little bit, because I don't know what's super important, so I don't know. The principals are on their well-deserved vacations, so it's not quite the right time, but maybe when they start trickling back in. I think they've already had.
Yeah, they've had
a
two
chance
different
to express what's
opportunities,
super
yeah.
important, so I don't know, maybe reviewing that. and
Yeah.
just Seeing if there's anything. In terms of things that they want. That they cost them.
Okay, Seth, what is the timeline of discussions? We're talking about priority projects tonight. What are we talking about? Like next steps? What are we talking about next? And then what are we talking about after?
So for the bond, if you are going to go to a bond, you have to identify what the number is that you're hoping to go towards. I know one of the things we've talked about a lot is making sure that what the perception from the community of what is being promised as part of the bond is what can be delivered. And so we want to make sure that we're outlining a viable scope of work that's assigned to that cost. So really, it's identifying what the number is and identifying what the projects are that fit within that number.
Yeah.
Super easy.
I mean, the way Sandra and I, from the agenda perspective, right, is that there'll be a project list that will, sort of have whatever set of this we decide we want to fit into the available dollars. And that we will formally adopt that at the same time as we adopt, for timing reasons, we will adopt that at the same time as we officially adopt the bond ballot. The difference between the two is that the board can change the project list whenever we want. We can't, we have to put a particular ballot measure on with language that says what we'll do with it. That's going to be general enough that we can do any of this. And then just for the public's clarity, we'll adopt a project list that says, here's what we're going to do. But then if circumstances change a year or two down the line, we say, actually, we're going to pull this and do this instead of this. Circumstances
here's
change. And here's why.
Another state mandate.
Oh, my
Awesome.
God.
Don't think so.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
actually, another next step is that we will be wrapping up the documentation of the formal master plan. There'll be a whole document that identifies the steps that we took and what the outcomes were that evolved from that. We'll get that out to you as a draft so that you can review it for the August 5th meeting.
Thank you. Can I just add one more question? It occurred to me. When I was going through the campus plans, it wasn't entirely clear to me from the layout, and it may not even be clear conceptual level at this point, but sometimes you get little clusters of spaces, and it wasn't clear to me whether that's one building or just adjacent buildings. And so it wasn't entirely clear to me where. Yeah.
I'm trying to see if I can give you an example.
Well, so say,
Easy to read. So like, for instance, this. Or-
yeah, we're like, well, some of the ones where it's like the library and the student wellness center and the other thing are all adjacent, and it wasn't clear to me whether that's a good, whether like it would make sense in the grand scheme to like, we're building this building because the library is super important, so we might as well do the, whatever it is, 200 square feet for the student wellness center, or like, to what extent that's gonna play in the designs. My assumption is we're at an early enough stage that we can kind of detach anything we want to detach, but
Yes, I think we want to be mindful, right now, we're just kind of in planning.
yeah.
And that, and concepts and locations and adjacencies, but once we get into actual construction and programming, then we would say, okay, we're gonna put a library here, but we could add a smaller wellness center adjacent to the library to, wherever, and that's where the construction drawings come in, and we can actually know that.
Well, I mean, my inclination, money is tight enough that my inclination would be that we really try not to do things that, not to throw in spaces that aren't priority,
Sure.
because we've got enough different stuff going on that it's like, it's not a case where we're building like one building, so we might as well make it
We
10%
scope, we call
larger.
that scope creep.
Right, so.
You don't want
so
that.
That would be, yeah.
It made me actually come up with a question. Are the new construction, is that expected to be stick built or design build or whatever?
We can,
To be
we can
determined.
need to be determined, yeah.
Okay.
We could see what's the most cost effective. In certain areas, it might need to be a custom stick built building, but in other areas, if we can use modular or prefabricated, and if it's cost effective, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Under what conditions would a stick built be cost effective?
It might be a building that's so custom, that they don't have like a prefabricated, like modular system that's like already ready to go.
It tends to be the specialty spaces, honestly,
What's
the
that?
specialty or larger bay spaces like multi-purpose buildings and things that have stages and, classrooms. There are many, many modular options out there. And there are even modular options for things like libraries and.
But not for multi-purpose rooms, even though every
Yeah,
school.
you think you would have one, yeah.
I'm sure that there's. I'm sure there are systems that could be used to build those types of big volume spaces, but those are the ones that tend to be the ones that there aren't as many options and have to be a little bit more customized.
Does it make sense for us to, if we're doing 5 multi-purpose buildings, to adopt a standard building and apply it to all lots?
It certainly moves you towards equity, for sure.
Cost efficiency.
And if there's some sort of modular product, absolutely, because then you have something that is very consistently detailed and.
You're gonna write that down.
Oh
my
God.
Please.
So I have a question about the facilities master plan. How many years out is this plan looking?
That's a great question. It depends on how long it will take for each of the different phases to be accomplished. This is really a plan for, here are all of the things that we see that are needed on each of these campuses, both in terms of renovating existing facilities and also spaces that are new for the programs that you're currently planning. We obviously don't have magic ball for all the programs that are unknown and coming in the future, but we anticipate that the first phase would likely be 5 to 8 years. Once you're accomplishing funding and getting design and detailing and documenting,
And the other stages?
it's a matter of funding and phasing and getting all the documents.
We have more need than one bond can currently cover. So if you think about 6 or 8 years, 12 to 16 years.
We'll try to apply for some state funding. We do have state matching grants and for new construction and modernization. But usually that money comes at the end, but you have to get in line like everyone else, and you might not get the money for 6 or 7 years. So sometimes the project will be completed in, let's say, 2027, you might not get the funding until 2030. You might have to wait 3 years, so after the project's already been completed. But that's a potential revenue, but it is down the road.
Have you looked at facility master plans for other districts around here and looked at how long, what their time horizon is? 'Cause I seem to remember that facilities master plans have, facility master plan 2025 through 2045. Something like that. That's just cool.
I've looked at Mountain View Wisconsin, and I don't remember it being phrased in that way, like that was. My impression, which is purely an impression, is that they tend to be phased around one chunk of funding. What are we gonna do?
Right.
Or oftentimes it might be 2. We're
Sometimes
doing
2.
some big major projects and then we're gonna come back and do all modernizations. Every district is very different in my experience, based on what the needs are in each of the campuses.
But my impression for this, like conceptually, especially given where we are on an enrollment basis. is that if we can do all, of it, probably satisfy. It's really switching. That's your impression.
Yeah.
Anyone? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And for being here.
All right, we are.